Welcome to the Steady On Stronger Together podcast. I am your host, Angie Bauman. Cynthia Ruchti is an author, speaker, and literary agent. She also has years of experience as a radio host, which shines through in her calm, articulate style of communication. In her book, Afraid of the Light, Cynthia has woven together a story about people who struggle with a hoarding compulsion. But Cynthia goes beyond the mess on the surface of this issue to introduce us to the issues that lie beneath. As I read and we talked about this dramatic display of brokenness, I could feel the Holy Spirit urging me to consider the less obvious places this behavior is displayed in my life as well. Let's listen in. Good evening, Steady On community, and welcome to our, what month is it? February. It's only February. So February virtual book club discussion. We are here tonight with Cynthia Ruchti. Cynthia, welcome. We're so grateful to have you here to talk about your book. We're going to talk tonight about Afraid of the Light, and just a wonderful read. And we're going to get into kind of the content here in just a second. We really enjoyed it. And I, just grateful for you tackling this. It talks about the issue of hoarding, and we'll get into that in just a second. But Cynthia, before we even dive into your book, would you take just a minute and just talk to us a little bit about yourself, your family, introduce us to you and your work? Would you do that for us?
That would be great. I am a mother and have 6 grandchildren. I know that's starting out kind of rough, but I have 6 grandchildren, 3 kids. Everybody lives within about 15 or 20 minutes of me, which is the ideal. And I know I have so much to be grateful for because of that. I know there are a lot of people who are far away from their kids and their grandkids. I'm married to my grade school sweetheart.
I read that on your website. Yes.
So I wouldn't recommend it necessarily that people fall in love at 11 and 12 and keep that relationship clear through till the end of their life. But certainly a long-term marriage is a wonderful, wonderful thing. But when we got married at 20 and 21, we'd known each other for a long time already and thought, well, we have this down pat then. But year 1 of our marriage taught us, we had so much to learn. and we're still learning. We're still learning even after all these years. But just enjoy the fact that even now, one of our sons lives about 3 miles away from us with a couple of those grandkids. So it's a great joy to have that kind of atmosphere. I grew up in a very loving home. My parents were very hard workers. My dad was an educator. He taught junior high band for his whole career, if you can imagine. And my mom was a registered nurse and worked nights and slept days. So that made it for an interesting family dynamic. I was the oldest of 5 siblings. And I kind of took on some sort of faux mothering roles from a very young age too. So all of that was preparation in a way too for the stories I tell, for the emotions, for understanding that families are all different. So when I have novels that talk about family dynamics, some of which I've experienced within my own family, but some I have to either imagine or lean on the counsel and the advice of friends who have gone through things too. So that's kind of my family in a nutshell. I started out working in, and some people know this story, but I started out working in a chemistry lab and thought that was going to be my life's work. And took time off from that so I could stay home with my kids when they were toddlers. And during that time, I realized I wasn't going back to the lab, that home was where my heart was. But I had taken some correspondence course in creative writing so that I could learn how to do this thing that interested me, but I never saw it as a career in any way. And the last assignment was to write a script for a 15-minute radio broadcast, which I had absolutely no interest in whatsoever and procrastinated for the better part of a year, and finally pulled that out and wrote that script just so I could get my little certificate that said I passed the course. And within a couple of weeks of getting that certificate, I was handed an opportunity to write for Christian radio, which I did. And a 15-minute broadcast, which I had never even heard of before that assignment. And that broadcast, The Heartbeat of the Home, was on for 33 straight years, 48 stations across the country at one time. And we were able to, my radio partner and I were able to do it from our little farmhouses here a quarter of a mile away from one another. So
that was like high tech. I'm sorry. Like, yeah. Seriously, like that's cool stuff. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and I'm old enough that we first started off with a little Radio Shack cassette player that we recorded on, and for some reason the stations took it, and we did reel to reel at one time, and then we started actually typing on a manual typewriter the scripts. I wrote all the scripts, and doing the by hand editing, which meant cutting and pasting was with a scissors and tape. And we eventually graduated to an electric typewriter, and then the computers came into the universe. And so I've lived long enough to have experienced a lot of the different changes that have happened within the writing world, as well as collecting a few life experiences along the way that worked their way into my books too.
Thank you for sharing that about your background. I love that. I love knowing that about you. How many novels have you written? We're going to be talking about Afraid of the Light tonight. What novel is this for you, and how many have you written?
I'm going to lose track because I usually count how many
That's a good career.
Total. How many books total? So I'm working on book number 36, but some of them are nonfiction, and I have quite a number of them that are devotionals, which is nonfiction, but a different category.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So this has been, 2010 was when the first book released. So I've been writing a lot.
Yes, you have.
Pretty quickly. But it's also an encouragement to people to not necessarily think, okay, I did that, I'm done. Mm-hmm. But that there may be something new for them, no matter what stage of life they're in. There was an awful lot that I was doing in writing with little kids underfoot, and then with teenagers and that stage, and now with grandchildren underfoot, and a different stage and a different phase that have all contributed to the body of work, actually, because of what we've been through, what we experienced, that can't help but show up on the pages.
Yeah.
But so I hope that it's an encouragement to other people too, to not think I'm 40 and I'm not published yet, I guess there's no hope for me. That's not true. In fact, you're probably still gaining the wisdom it's going to take to navigate it all.
I think that's beautiful. Thank you for saying that. I know one of the writing groups that I'm in, one of the things that they talk to us about is just like there's always, the enemy will always, put those lies in your head. I'm too young. I'm too old. I don't know enough. I don't know, whatever. And there's always reasons not to do it. Right. But if you really believe that God has called you to try to get a message out into the world, will we be obedient and work through? Because it does take a long time. There are hurdles. There's a lot of personal work God does in you as you're trying to, get your message out in a way that will be able to be picked up by other people. So I think any of us that's in any writing or, any kind of ministry, really, because not, what are we willing to stay in there and overcome the obstacles that we're going to have to overcome in order to be obedient to that call, for sure. Yeah.
That is so true. Angie, I think another element of it is that we can never know, is God calling us to one person or millions? If he's calling us to one person and we devote our entire life and passion to what we believe he's called us to, that's still success. And in God's economy, that's great math. He loves that kind of math.
I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. It's the opposite can be true as well, but sometimes we feel like a failure if we haven't reached many. And if he has asked us to reach one, and we don't even know what he has said behind the scenes necessarily, he just wants our faithfulness.
Yeah.
So whether that turns out to be 1 or 20 or thousands, the faithfulness is what he's measuring by.
And I think that's such an important message in a world that tries so hard to quantify everything, right? Because no matter what our calling, I think we have to continually, I know that's such a big deal to me, to continually to resist I need something to measure this. Please help me measure my effectiveness, right? Like, I think we probably can all relate to that in a certain degree. And over again, through things like what you just said, the Lord reminds me, I'm not measuring your effectiveness that way. I'm just calling you to be faithful and obedient. So thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for encouraging us all that way. So we're going to talk about Afraid of the Light. But before we do that, I got this email. I printed it off because Cynthia has a new book coming out on March 2. So I want to put in a plug for that too. For those who've read this one along with us, Facing the Dawn is coming out on March 2. And I'm going to put some information on how you can get that in these comments, like when we're done here too. So, and it's in the show notes for those who will be listening later. So definitely want to give a shout out for that, because I didn't know that was happening. When I got that email today, I'm like, what good timing. This is awesome. So
it is. There's a lot of excitement buzzing around.
Yes. Book launches can be very stressful, though. I've served enough on those that I like, ooh, that's a stressful time for an author. So, so a lot about what we've learned about hoarding, I think probably most of us would say, I know that show on TV, right? That hoarders show on Hulu or whatever that we see it come up on. I don't know if it's on Hulu or Netflix or one of the ones that I have. So help us understand, like, maybe what our conceived idea or preconceived idea about hoarding, how true is that to what you learned about, like, what a hoarding complex is as you did research for writing this book?
I think really those kinds of shows were part of the inspiration for me wanting to go farther, because I knew it couldn't. We all know that the reality shows are sensationalized, they're edited, they need to have those good sound bites. They're going to look for the sensational or spectacular and watch for that. And I had a feeling that there was something more behind the story that we weren't getting. So I went exploring, and part of that meant doing research by watching those shows, but then also by diving into the clinical or the psychological research about it, and articles and blog posts and what the experts say about it, and then talking to families, talking to people who either have a tendency toward that themselves, or who are in the actual position of being having a hoarding addiction. And we know there are several layers to that. You can just be a collector that things have gotten kind of out of hand, or you can be someone who has an obsession for collecting or an obsession for purchasing, or the collection really does takes over life. Or it can be the kind where it's the accumulation of completely worthless things, old gum wrappers and meat that has spoiled, but you don't want to give it away don't want to throw it away because you're sure it has some usefulness in there, doesn't it? And that kind of compulsion, that kind of addiction was the one that fascinated me the most. But I think we can gain something no matter where we are on the spectrum. And one of my theories is that we're all hoarding something.
So you do believe that we all deal with hoarding something in some way. Talk a little bit more about that to us, if you will. What does that look like? Because I don't keep meat that's spoiled.
Right.
But what would you say to that? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we're not counting books. Books don't count.
Okay, so we know yours.
We're not even gonna touch that area. But I think that it in a lot of ways we're in this place where we're realizing, if we start to look at a topic like obsessive compulsive hoarding, we start to realize, wait a second, my problem isn't things. Mine might be I remember every ugly word someone has ever said to me, and I have stored them away somewhere. I don't let other people into that room. I don't want them to see it. But if another one comes today, I'm going to keep it. I'm not going to let it go, because somehow that defines me, or it seems familiar, or I pull around myself to things, even if they're thorny on the inside. I'm wrapping myself in that thorny thing because that's either what I'm used to, or that's what I think I deserve. Sometimes it's a bitterness or a resentment against someone that resentment is so old, it's moldy. We may not even be able to remember what we were resentful about, or what stirred up the bitterness or that family feud from however long ago. Where that part's gone. We don't even remember what started it. We just remember that every time we see that person, there's this stirring in our stomach and a resistance to it. Or it may be that we're hoarding hoarding certain things that we're just not willing to share with others. When I look at, and we can all identify, I think, with who did I turn into once they told us that toilet paper might have a shortage? Who did I turn into? Because all of a sudden I'm thinking thoughts like, if I send my son back into the store, can we get another package? I'll wait in the car. And if I, and I wasn't going to do that because I'm also a rule follower. But on the other hand, I had a thought like that. And what did it take to turn me into this person who would want to grab what we needed for ourselves, rather than my first instinct being, who can I share my portion, if I have an allotment, who can I share it with? Or if food is scarce, is my first thought, who else is hungrier than I am? Or is my first thought, okay, then we'll keep this and we'll get that, and I'll go collect that, and I'll collect this from somewhere else. So sometimes we're hoarding fears, or we're hoarding a resistance to embrace those who are, and especially in this study for this book really taught me, research for the book taught me that I needed to grow in the area of compassion toward those who, at least on the surface, seem unlovable, or someone who has a problem I don't get, a problem I don't understand, or a passion for something I don't understand. And instead of being free of judgment, I realized I had a few judgments stacking up in a pile over here. And I needed to dispose of them, whatever it would take and however much it would cost me, dispose of them so that I could live a life where I wasn't going to trip over that sort of thing.
Not going to trip over that. Yeah. That's good. Yeah, I like that. I'm going to call Lisa out. Don't get nervous, but I know.
I know like everything she's saying. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Because the thing with Lisa, and I just know this about her for knowing for so long, is that she has when she doesn't understand something, she struggles to not just dismiss it like that's not important or something. And I know that because she said their thing reading this book, she's like, I just have so much more like compassion for people who are dealing with that. Speak to that, Lisa, if you want to, because I don't want to. You can.
Yeah, I started reading this book, and I just texted Angie right away, and I'm like, I love it. I've read it twice. Oh. I learned so much, but I always say I lack the compassion gene. And I'm working on that. I've worked on that for years, and I'm doing better. And I think one of the things,
she's a nurse, a retired
I was. I have compassion for ill children.
Right. That's not your own.
Just not your own, right?
Right. But I think it's because I don't understand. I'm not kind of a pull up your bootstraps and let's get going kind of girl.
Just throw it out.
Yeah. And when I'm reading this, I'm going, oh my gosh, if that is where those people are coming from, and they literally can't help it because of some issue in their life, I just grew so much compassion for those people and understanding them and the empathy, and I wanted to help them. And I loved this book. I don't know how many times I get to say that, but
100.
Yes. She probably doesn't tire of it.
So many things about this book I loved. And that was one of the things, having you write about how those people's minds worked and how things grew in them to get them where they were. Because I always wonder, how do you get from this to that, kind of like what you were saying, and you kind of filled some of that in, and I just really appreciated that. Plus I loved her humor, the thoughts in her. Every time she thought something, I'm going to say somewhat sarcastic, I just busted out laughing. I just thought she was hilarious too. But I agree. I just learned a lot from your book. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I learned a lot from the book. And that was one of the very things, is I apparently needed to grow in compassion and empathy. And then I kind of tried to apply it to, so how do I look at a heroin addict? my typical response would be, ooh, or how could you do that to yourself? Or some other reaction like that. And I, when I think about it more deeply, I think, oh my goodness, if Jesus were walking beside me and we passed the same heroin addict, Jesus's response would have been loving and caring. He would have noticed him. He would have reached out to him. He would have responded to him, understanding what was behind it all. And if that's our model and that's our example, then if I just assume that there's something behind it all, there's something behind that angry grocery store clerk, there's something behind that guy on the phone who I have hung up on how many times because he wants to take care of my car warranty for me, or the person who's in customer service and not really serving very well, but maybe it's just a friend at church or a neighbor or someone in my own household, my own family. Most of the time, the anger that we see is a mask for something else underneath it. So, and most of the time with hoarders, the piles that we see are a mask or a response to something that's underneath it. So in that sense, I felt like I was getting such an education on the difference between my natural responses to things and people like that, or situations like that, and what my goal really should be is I let Jesus just live his life through me instead of how I think, how I would naturally respond. I know I said that a couple of times, but
no, it's good. It's good. I'm going to call Maria out now a little bit because her grandfather really struggled with this, with hoarding. He's passed away 10, 11 years ago now. But Maria, would you just talk about that a little bit? Because I know reading this book just kind of made you ask some questions about like maybe what was behind it for him. Would you speak to that just a little bit?
Yeah, I first want to thank you. I too love the book, and I want to thank you for shining light on the subject area, because I think sometimes in the families, like I didn't even know there was like a clinical diagnosis for it. I just thought that was something that you do, and there's shame that comes with it, and there's all these things that some of I forget that character's name, her children are experiencing. Anyway, but now, from, I mentioned before we went on, Eli is a character in this book that I really could relate to. And watching him go through his steps really shed light on like, I wonder what it was, like as a child, I didn't notice it, but then as an adult life, looking back into my grandfather's life, and then having to be the one to clean up that, what he left. There's frustration in it. There's I really do feel bad for my lack of understanding. I wish I could go back in time and do things different. But my grandfather was a very compassionate man, and could tell nobody. He took in every stray. He bailed people out of jail he didn't even know. That's just who he was. And so, but I know he had a lot of hurt in his life. But just the realization that this was a disorder, for lack of a better word, that I was naive enough, young enough that I thought it was just my grandfather experiencing this, and this was just our family's problem. And until the TV show started popping up, in the last probably 10 or 15 years. But so for me, from my own heart, I did a little more compassion, a different level of compassion, if you will, and the appreciation of just the light, like hopefully other family members, whatever, can read this and be like, there's help, or there's, digging deeper into how can I best help this person, rather than just blame them for the mess or whatever. Luckily, he did have my grandmother who balanced him pretty well. So, they had that, but it was very.
And that's the answer. One of the things that I thought about too when I was reading is that, for me, the go-to answer would be like, just get in there and clean that all out, and it's like, that's not, first of all, that doesn't address the problem, it doesn't. And secondly, it's so traumatic for the person who's dealing with it, when there's a reason why they're keeping this stuff and you don't understand it maybe, but it matters to them. And yeah, can we connect with that?
Yeah, Cynthia, that's the other thing I was going to say that you really brought out in this book was patience.
Yeah.
You know, the patience of the people who were trying to help was just immeasurable.
Yeah.
And getting to the heart of some of the things was just so well, you know, written, and it all felt very, very real to me. Felt very nonfiction.
I want to switch gears just a second. Cynthia, can you help us make a spiritual connection? If we all hoard something and we have a story, we have a reason that we hang on to something. I was thinking about like the negative words, you know, I replay things in my mind when I have felt like hurt or rejected, or right. Like I save these things. I think they probably serve me about as well as that meat that's spoiled in the refrigerator, right?
Yeah.
But why do I hang on to them? There's something I'm getting from them, or I would let them
just
go,
as
right?
poisonous.
Yeah, so right. So can you help us make like why we do this? What's the spiritual connection?
I think one of the things that it symbolically in the story were the latched doors and the closed curtains and pinned shut. Not closing them was not enough, but pinning them shut. And I think a lot of us can see how that's part of how we often respond spiritually to many things. Who is the one who we know sees? That's God. But we artificially do everything we can to keep him from seeing what's really going on in our mind and our heart. He knows, and we, on some level, we know he knows, but we will hide that. We will slap a smile on. We will pretend that doesn't exist. And we can take that from the spiritual into that element of the family of the hoarders need compassion too. The families of the hoarders need somebody to listen, somebody who will understand, and somebody who will gentle them through the process too, because that's part of it. But so here we are in the same realm in a way spiritually, when we're looking at the that little sin that we keep going back to, that little whatever that is, whether that's a thought or a word or an irritation or impatience or irritability, or the tendency to gossip about something, or having a juicy story and we feel we need to share it. And some of us have conquered that. Some of us are still fighting it. It's that spiritually, it's looking to something else to fulfill us, as opposed to Christ and Christ alone. And those things in the Bible, they talk about them as idols. We're making something we're allowing our affection to be driven by that, whatever that is, and a lot of times for us, it'll come in the form of, I can identify this very well. I'm disappointed, I'm hurt, I'm emotionally battered, I'm exhausted, and Cheetos look really good right now, or something of that nature. I think I can quit. Sure, I can quit. I don't need this. No, of course I don't need it, but oh man, it looks so good. And I'm starting my diet tomorrow, so I'll just have the Cheetos today. Right. I kind of deserve it. I've earned it.
Yes.
And we can see it in other realms. We can see that real easily. But even at the heart of that is a spiritual issue. Because I thought that a Cheeto could give me some kind of satisfaction or salve or balm or healing or soothing. I'm self-soothing with cupcakes. I'm self-soothing with Cheetos or whatever it is. Pick an addiction, any addiction. And God is standing there, and Jesus is standing there with his arms open wide saying, will you let me in? Will you let in the light? I already know how ugly that thought is that you just had. I already know. I want to be invited in to help you clean up that mess. And the way I'm going to do it, I'm going to be as gentle with you as I have been with anybody else in the history of time. I'm going to be gentle with you. We're going to walk through this. We'll go through it together. I won't leave you. I'm going to be beside you when we walk through it. but we have to get to a place where you're not putting something else on in the spot where I belong. So I think spiritually, there's a lot of it that applies to that kind of idea. And then we're out of that when we're able to conquer and gain some victory, which came from him in the first place. So we have nobody to thank but him. It's not our willpower. Certainly, it's never strong enough. But when that victory comes then, and he gets the glory, then that just feeds this beautiful cycle where if you're thinking of a hoarder household, you think that it smells better in there, and that it's not dangerous anymore. It's not dangerous to be with your own thoughts anymore. It's really deep when you think about it. And I'm sure some people are listening who haven't read the book, and they're thinking, wait, this is nonfiction then, right? But I loved the exercise of being able to use the form of story, use novel to be able to explore deeper topics, and then come out of the experience feeling like I gained something besides, in addition to a story. So does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, it does. I can relate to that so much. And these girls, especially Lisa and Maria, will agree to this. Like, one of the things that I deal with, I don't know how it's a hoarding, but I'm sure that it is somehow, is that I keep my schedule too full. Always. I keep my schedule too full. And I've really, for several years, I've prayed about that. I do a little better, and then I get a little worse. Like, it goes back and forth. But if I'm very honest, which I'm trying very hard to be, the reality is, if I don't have myself scheduled, and if I'm not producing, then I wonder if I'm valuable. And if I happen to have white space in my life, I have to decide what to do. I don't know what brings me joy. I don't really want to think about that, And so, like, it seems just like, and the world is very happy with me when I stay busy, because I get so, like, I say yes to things and I get things done or whatever. And so, like, it's kind of like not a big deal, but I know over the last few years, the Lord is working on my heart about that, saying, really, I'd like for you, like what you're saying, invite me into this, because actually there's more going on in here than just you're a productive, busy person, right? Like, I'd like to speak to what's underneath that. So I'm not exactly sure how that lines up with hoarding, but I know it does, because I'm just resonating, with what you're saying in regards to that in my life. Yeah.
I think that's really insightful, very insightful for a lot of us. And you're not alone, even
yay.
in that feeling.
I mean, no, not yay. I'm sorry for others.
But that idea too, that white space would seem scary, or or not doing anything, like sitting there not doing anything makes me a slug.
Right.
When God may be saying, not sitting there not doing anything is the only way you're going to be quiet enough to hear what I'm trying to tell you.
I know.
So I think there are an awful lot of us that would say that may be my issue. That may be the corner where I could apply some of this. Let the light in, let some breathing space in. And for a lot of us too, it kind of leans just a little bit toward codependency when we think about who needs me at the moment, who needs me. And if nobody needs us at the moment, we feel just a little bit empty.
Yeah.
So we'll go invent something. We'll invent somebody who needs us, or go searching for it, rather than being comfortable enough to just be alone if the only other one in proximity is our Lord. So, oh man, I think I just preached to myself.
Yes. But I think that's all of us, though, really. Yeah. I mean, it's just different. Just, I think with the hoarding, like, it does, our hurt, our brokenness, our need to, like you say, our idol, whatever, like, it doesn't look the same in all of our lives, but the temptation or the drive, I think, is very much the same. Maria's got something to say.
And I appreciate, so standing right there, even though it may not be the same hoarding like stuff, but I appreciated the small steps that were modeled in this story. Like, you don't just break open the door and get in and open the curtain. I mean, it's baby steps. And you'll see the characters experience some steps backwards sometimes, but that doesn't mean that the forward motion can't continue. And so I think that's an important piece to keep in mind as we are all being, challenged in these, finding this area, that, or we we get put in the place of encouraging others in this area, like baby steps. Don't, we can't come in from the outside and just, ramrod, because that's not really helpful. So yeah, whatever the situation is.
And just right, whatever the situation is, I'm thinking about maybe with my children or my grandchildren and decisions they're making or choices they're wrestling with. And any one of us could say, well, I'll come tell you what to do. I'll come tell you what that right decision is, or
just don't eat the Cheetos. How
Yes,
hard is that?
Right.
But don't tell me to take a commitment off my calendar. That's not your business, right? Like, But
if you don't buy the Cheetos, you
won't eat the Cheetos. Because it's hard, right? It is hard when it's your thing,
hard,
though.
yeah.
It is hard when it's your thing. Yeah.
Yeah, when it's your thing, whatever that is.
Yeah.
So true. So very true.
Yeah. I love your tagline on your website, which says, I can't unravel, I'm hemmed in hope. So kind of as we wrap this up, would you just talk about hope for all of us? Like, if hoarding's not our issue, yet hoarding is our issue, right? How does hope or the lack of hope, how does it play into how we can overcome these things?
I think a lot of us would say that if we're going to use hoarding as a great example, I think a lot of us would say that the compulsive hoarder probably gave up on the idea of hope a long time ago, or they have a misplaced hope.
Okay.
They believe, if I can just get this end table cleared off, I'll be okay, or I'll have a good start. And they can't get that far, or they get part of the end table cleared off and then something else comes in to fill in that spot. Or they say, if people would just leave me alone, I'd be okay. And we can apply that into a lot of situations as well too. And we think about the addict who thinks one more time in the rehabilitation center, one more round, and I'll be fine. Or and then they fall or they fail, and all of a sudden the frail hope that they might have had shows itself as for its true colors, or they are giving up more. Every failure drops them farther down into a pit of not being able to see the hope anymore. The room gets darker, they close themselves off more and more. But so in some ways I think that our role, and that would be for one another, but it also would be for those that we have connections with, is to keep hope alive for somebody who feels like hope is dead already. We know the source of hope is in Jesus Christ. He is our hope. In Romans, he's called the God of hope. He's also called the God of endurance. And those two things paired together make a really strong and powerful rock for us to cling to. But there are a lot of people that can't, if there's a little ember of a fire and it's going to go out, they need somebody to come along and just blow gently enough that ember is going to come back into flame again. And I think one of our key roles then is to help keep hope alive for other people. And that won't be talking them into it, but it will be that we're tending the hope for them. I'll take care of this for you until you can hope again yourself. And it might be in regard to how we react to them, the unconditional love that we show them or show ourselves. It might be in the way that we don't give up on them. I can't even count the number of people that it would have been so easy to give up on in the past. And I think of one person in particular who had spent time in jail, and he'd get out, but jail was a comfortable place. So sometimes he would do something improper, wrong, illegal, so he could end up in jail again, because in jail he wasn't homeless and he got 3 meals a day, and that's what he knew. And my natural thinking was, oh man, we've been praying for this guy for so many years. I don't know. I was so on the verge of saying the words aloud. I think I'm supposed to just give up on this guy. And it was within a couple of weeks of that kind of thinking that started brewing in me that there was this radical turnaround, and all of a sudden the path was upward, 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 upward. And I was kind of slapped up the side of the head, as the Lord often does, to be reminded that that endurance thing, or that not giving up, may be the very thing that spells hope to somebody else, or to ourselves too.
Yeah. Yeah. To ourselves too. Right. Yeah. Because when we see it, when we're able to see God work in someone else, it shines that light into places that maybe we're not so confident that he's at work in our lives too. So, yeah.
Okay.
This has been such encouraging conversation tonight. Thank you so much for sharing this space with us, and for writing this book, and for sharing it out. And I'm just grateful for you, for your ministry, for your time this evening. This book, just to remind everyone, is Afraid of the Light. And the book that's coming out on March 2nd is called Facing the Dawn. Do you want to just give us your little, I'm sure you have a little preview. Can you give us just a little teaser for our Facing the Dawn before we let you go?
My little teaser for that is that Mara is a woman who feels like all the color has been drained from her life, as if she were a garment or a comforter that had been hung on the line and stayed outside too long, and all the colors are gone. Everything she touches and does seems like a disaster. The joy is gone. She's facing all kinds of crises. She's in a job she doesn't like. Her kids are all detention prone. She's got a real snarky sense of humor and loves that. And then a couple of major crises come in and plunge her into grief and loss. And her journey of where does she find her way out of this? How does she find her way out of this? And in this particular instance, I had to do a lot of research and study about our grief reactions, and the ones that are healthy and the ones that are unhealthy. And almost everybody, I think, can identify with that idea. If you thought that it was a book that was gloomy and sad, it has some very sad and touching and poignant moments, but it also has humor in it too. And I guess you have to read it to find out how did we pull that off?
I love that. That's good. That's perfect. That's perfect. One last question before we let you go. I always like to end on this. Is there anything right now, Cynthia, just in your personal walk, that you're reading or listening to or watching or anything like that, that you just studying, that's keeping you connected with God? I bet you have a book or two on your nightstand.
Well, I have two answers to that. One is that I got myself this super giant print Bible, and it has, interestingly enough, a lot of white space in it too. And the
great
the joy of that for me is that it almost like jumps off the page. And I only need reading glasses once in a while, so that wasn't the main problem. But the words are jumping off the page, which makes them feel new and fresh to me, which is great. And one of the other things is I love music is one of the strong ways that I connect with the Lord. Love worship music. And I have a tendency to crank it up real loud when I have those moments at home. But there's one song in particular that seems like it fits with Afraid of the Light, but also with Facing the Dawn, that I've been playing. One of the apps that I have plays that song over and over and over again by different artists. And at first I thought, well, this is crazy. No, I love this. And the last version is in Spanish, and that one gets me too.
Yeah.
But it's Graves into Gardens.
Oh yes.
And part of that song says, I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. Man's empty praise and treasures that fade are never enough. Then you came along, Lord, and put me back together, and every desire is now satisfied here in your love. I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws, Lord. You've seen them all, and you still call me friend, because the God of the mountain is the God of the valley. There's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can.
That's beautiful.
That's really ministered to me a
Yeah.
lot in these days.
This has been so wonderful tonight. Again, thank you so much for your time. And thank you for those who were watching tonight and who are commenting. For those who will pick it up later, we're so grateful to you, Cynthia. Thank you so much.
Thank you for this wonderful conversation. You made my night. But
Oh, yay. Well, we're so happy. So we'll have to have you back.
Oh, okay.
We want to talk about more. Until next time, peace. A reviewer on Cynthia's website writes, Cynthia has never been afraid of tackling a tough issue. Thank you, Cynthia, for raising awareness. And perhaps most importantly, thank you for helping us make a spiritual connection to this issue of hoarding that presents itself differently in all of us. Thank you so much for listening. I pray that wherever your day takes you, you are walking in the confident knowledge that you are a beloved, cherished child of God. Peace.